everyone. We are glad to be back. We've got some interesting topics to share with you this week. But before we get started, we'll quickly introduce ourselves for those of you who aren't familiar with who we are yet. I am Jessica Melnick. I'm a registered holistic nutritionist, the founder of the Anti-Arthritis Method, the host of the Happy Joints Arthritis Solutions Group, and I help both women and men with various forms of arthritis get back to living life the way they choose to, not the way that they have to. And I did wake up this morning with a bit of a cold, so bear with me if my voice doesn't work out for the whole time, but we'll do our best. I'll pass it over to you, Casey.
Yeah. I'm Casey Kephart. I am the founder of the Feel Good Formula. I'm a functional medicine nutritionist, and I work with women with all different types of autoimmune diseases to get you back to the activities you love to do, squash those symptoms, get your life back. And I reside in St. Petersburg, Florida.
Amazing. So today we're going to talk about restaurant food and some of the hidden ingredients in restaurant food, how it's prepared, and just some of the ingredients that are in some of the foods that we might get when we are out and about at a restaurant or ordering in that we're not aware of. And we're talking about this because there's a lot of things that can be really detrimental to our health that we may not be aware of if we don't understand how things are prepared and the types of ingredients that are found in various restaurant foods. So we're going to go through some of the top things to watch out for when you are ordering in or whether you're going out to eat. And one of the big ones we find is cross-contamination. So I think we can really speak to this in terms of especially like gluten. So Casey, of course, you have celiac disease. So you're very familiar with what to look out for when you are grocery shopping, when you're ordering in, or when you're eating out for dinner, because there is so many places that gluten and other potentially harmful ingredients are hidden. And what cross-contamination means is that there is foods that can be like, you can find gluten in foods that maybe, they have a gluten-friendly item. It says gluten-friendly on the menu, but maybe they're frying it in the same fryer as things that have gluten on them. So for example, unless stated in the menu, restaurants use the same fryers for French fries, veggies, potatoes, etc., and the same cutting boards and utensils and surfaces as like for various foods. So unless you ask if they are, frying, let's say gluten-free fries in a separate fryer, your gluten-free fries are going to come into contact with breading and or other ingredients that may contain gluten in that same fryer. So does that make sense? I hope that I kind of talked about that in a roundabout way. So it's really important to make sure that you talk to your server when you're at the restaurant and ask if you are gluten-free. You need to make sure that they're gluten-friendly items. Like, what does that actually mean? Is there a separate fryer? Maybe you need to avoid ordering the French fries because they're fried in the same fryer as something that's breaded with a glutinous breading. So you just need to be aware of that and what to ask for.
Yeah, I would say another thing to look out for too is when you order, let's say, gluten-free bread. Most times it's going to still be toasted in the same toaster or toaster oven as regular bread, which still cross-contamination. So, or the same knife that is cutting the bread, or the same butter knife that is buttering the toast and might have gluten crumbs on it from the other bread. So just a lot of things to ask about if you are that severe in your gluten intolerance, sensitivity, or disease. Yeah, I think you covered most of the other cross-contamination, and cross-contamination is usually for gluten. You don't see a lot of cross-contamination with like milk just because they come out of different cartons and you don't really mix things together with milk. So it's mainly gluten that you need to worry for if you are out in a restaurant and sensitive or allergic to gluten.
Yeah, absolutely. Another one is omelettes. So I just assume that when you order an omelet, they're going to crack the eggs there and mix in the different ingredients that you have ordered to go in your omelet. But if you have a dairy sensitivity like myself and like many people with autoimmune conditions,
Mhm.
often some of the omelets are made with a pre-mix. So it's already eggs mixed with milk that's used to make the omelet, not from scratch. So it's really important to ask when you do order an omelet, is this a mix already or is this going to be made from scratch? So that you can let them know if you have a dairy sensitivity and need to have dairy left out.
Yeah. Same with, if we're on the dairy train, same with gluten-free pancakes. If you're trying to be gluten-free, they still have milk in it probably. So if you are dairy sensitive, or even if you're getting regular pancakes, they are going to have milk in it as well, even though you might substitute that milk when drinking it, I mean, when eating pancakes at home or when making them at home. Another thing would be butter. A lot of times they put butter in omelets and pancakes and for the frying of it. So you'll want to be conscious of that. And you can always tell your server or the chef too that like, hey, I'm dairy sensitive. Could you just use an oil or just omit the butter in general as well. But it's just often things, they're so small, we don't think about them. That happens in restaurants. We like to think that they cook the same way we do at home.
Yeah, and that's such a good point you make there, Casey. I wouldn't have even thought about that.
Mm-hmm.
That it's
Mm-hmm.
like, oh yeah, they might be putting butter on the grill that they're cooking this on. Yeah, no, there's so many little things that we often don't
Yes,
think about.
exactly.
Absolutely. Another one is MSG. So MSG, monosodium glutamate, isn't always called monosodium glutamate. It has a whole bunch of different names.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe, Casey, correct me if I'm wrong, it has gluten in it.
That's what I've heard too. And don't quote us on that because we're both not 100% sure, but I definitely stay away from MSG, one, for the gluten aspect, but two, because it's a neurotoxin, just meaning that it crosses the blood-brain barrier, goes directly to the brain and affects it. So the less MSG we can have, the better for our brain and our bodies.
Yeah, MSG, a lot of people are really sensitive to it without even knowing.
Mm-hmm.
I know here in the city that I live in, so when I was younger, a lot of restaurants were advertising no MSG because some people get really
Mm-hmm.
sick from it, whether it's migraines. My sister was super allergic when she was a child. She would get asthma attacks if we had any MSG. So it was really, really scary. So, like you said, MSG is a neurotoxin. It's not good for us. And it's found in a lot of things. Well, lots of foods, especially too, that aren't good for us to begin with, AKA like a special brand of corn chips that I used to love and eat regularly has MSG in it. And the reason why a lot of things like potato chips have or corn chips have MSG is because it's a flavor enhancer and because it's a neurotoxin and it stimulates our nervous system as well. It makes us want to eat more. So, and it's made that way for a reason, obviously. The food companies want you to keep on buying, and the restaurants want you to keep on coming back. So, just being aware of MSG and its potential effects.
And it's usually, what I found at least, like the cheaper brand of corn or potato chips too. You found it, at least I'm finding it, like the dollar store chips or just chips that are more not high quality. But you also find it in more ethnic foods as well. At least in America, you do, in the Asian food, Thai food, because it tastes so good and because it enhances the flavor. So your veggies, your rice, your noodles, French fries may have it. So if you are looking to stay away from that, again, tell your waiter up front what allergies or foods you are trying to stay away from. And if they're not certain, make sure that they go ask the chef.
And even call the restaurant ahead of time. If you have dietary needs, there's nothing to be embarrassed about. I've called restaurants ahead of time just to see if there was something there that I was able to eat without getting sick or having other issues. And more restaurants nowadays are, they're aware that this is not just something that, only affected like a very small percentage of the population. More and more people are getting more conscientious about what they're eating and have these requests and these needs, and they are starting to accommodate.
Yeah, one of the things that I've learned recently is that the UK, the law is that they have to put the allergies on their menus on what is in every single dish. In America and Canada, We don't have to do that. The restaurant staff doesn't even have to be knowledgeable in food allergies. So if you don't live in the UK where this is very prevalent and you do know up front, asking or calling ahead is going to be super important. And honestly, I like calling ahead a little better because one, they don't see my face and I don't see them rolling their eyes. So it just makes it more comfortable for me to ask my 5 questions that I have. They can give me an attitude on the phone, but I'm not ready to like throat punch them in person because I don't know who they are. So if you are like me, go ahead, and then you know right when you get to the restaurant what you're going to order, what you're going to have without doing this in person.
Yeah, so no arguments to be had.
Because I will tell that person that they need to go ask the chef now because just their voice is uncertain and they don't take it seriously, which is a shame.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So a couple more common foods that you might run across, whether you're grocery shopping or in a restaurant. I think we already covered the potatoes. So of course, French fries often, well, of course, they're breaded and they're deep fried, but they're not always breaded. Breading typically means that it has flour in it, which means gluten. So to just be aware of that, you know, you have to make sure that it says it's a gluten-free option. I know there's this amazing brunch restaurant in my city and they have a gluten-free potato option. They're not breaded and I believe they have a separate deep fryer for them and they're so good. So for a special treat once in a blue moon, I might have those. But yes, you have to ask. And like I said, restaurants are becoming more and more accommodating, and also go to maybe a higher quality restaurant if you do have dietary needs, because most of them are going to have higher quality foods and more options as well. Yeah. So one thing, and this surprised me, Casey brought this up. So imitation crab is something I used to love having as a child. It is made out of pollock fish. And of course it is made into these little swirls to look like crab leg meat, and it has like coloring in it. So not healthy, but as a child, I thought this was like super delicious. It's such a nice treat. It has gluten in it. So yeah, just to be aware, like who would have thought something like fish that's not breaded would have gluten in it? Like what?
Right. I know.
And yeah, isn't it crazy?
Like, it is. Why? The 2 things that I just learned have gluten in it, and we talked about one last time, was Euro meat. I was just floored that meat could have wheat in it and breading, and it's to combine the lamb and the beef together. So if you are a Greek person, make sure you ask if their Euro meat has gluten in it. I've heard really ethnic Euro meat does not, but I couldn't be certain with you. And then the last one that I just learned this past weekend, and again, we're still learning. I've been gluten-free since 2013, and there's just still items that we just figure out have gluten in them, is Bloody Mary mix. So most Bloody Mary mixes do have gluten in it unless it says gluten-free. So make sure you ask your bartender, make sure you are looking at the labels if you're buying it for home. And the ingredient in the Bloody Mary mix that had gluten in it was vegetable protein. So unless you read ingredient for ingredient, you wouldn't know that vegetable protein has wheat in it. And luckily it did say. So just keep an eye out for that and just always have your brain thinking, does this have gluten in it? Does this have dairy in it? Does this have MSG or whatever food sensitivity you're looking for?
Yeah. And a lot of food nowadays, especially if it's like a packaged food, will have like the gluten-free symbol on it if it is gluten-free. If it doesn't have that symbol on it, or if it doesn't say gluten-free on it, there is a good chance that it does have gluten of some name in there. And same with like the other allergens. Some, I find it more common now. A lot of foods will say, you know, potential trace amounts of these allergens, and it will list it somewhere like by the ingredients on the package. So just being aware of and knowing where to look on some of those foods as well.
Yeah. Also with the stamp of gluten-free, that means that it's made in a facility that is gluten-free as well. They use all different utensils and equipment. If it doesn't say gluten-free, like Jessica said, there might be gluten in there, but that doesn't mean there will be. It might still be gluten-free. It's just processed in a plant in a factory. that also processes gluten, and there may be some cross contamination. So do your best judgment there and how sensitive you are, how much risk you want to take. I eat foods, even though I'm celiac, I'm not like 100% sensitive, like where it's airborne. So I still eat the foods that don't have the gluten-free tag on it, as long as there's no ingredients in the food that would have gluten in it.
Good to
So
know.
yeah, make your best judgment.
Yeah. So, in a few other foods that you might not think of that have gluten in them, one is corned beef hash. So, that's similar to your example of the Euro meat, Casey. So, unless it's not homemade, like it's in a can, you know, sometimes restaurants use certain prepared foods, and that's fine. But to be aware, a lot of corned beef hash has gluten in it. Sushi. The rice is often made with malt vinegar, if not always, and malt vinegar has gluten in it. That's the malt part. Tempura, the batter that's used for tempura vegetables, tempura shrimp, such things like that, that batter has gluten. Soy sauce also has gluten. Thankfully, there's lots of gluten-free soy sauce alternatives on the market, like tamari. My favorite is coconut aminos, which is basically fermented coconut juice of some sort. It tastes exactly like soy sauce to me, maybe slightly less salty. It's great, especially if you have a sensitivity or an allergy to soy. That's also another common allergen. Soy is one of those foods that has been highly genetically processed or genetically modified. And so that tends to be a really heavily sprayed crop as well. So a lot of people have become more and more sensitive to soy. Soy in many, many forms is used as additives in so many different packaged foods. So just being aware of that as well. And the last one I have listed is chicken wings. So just be really careful with that, because often chicken wings, of course, are breaded, deep fried. Some of them are not, but then you have all the different sauces. And sauces are tricky because so many sauces have additives in them that are not good for a lot of us. So like I said before, soy is in so many things, from like dips, dressings, sauces, so many things. And of course, MSG, glutinous things are used as thickeners in a lot of those sauces as well. And then not to mention, a lot of sauces are just full of sugar in various forms, fructose, high fructose corn syrup, all these things that are terrible for managing your blood sugar and just really, really unhealthy for you in general. So being aware of kind of like what sauces you've got going on and potential breadings or other things that may be added. So if you're making them at home, I know Casey, I'll let you talk a little bit about chicken wings, because I know you make chicken wings for yourself.
Chicken wings are my favorite food, guys. So I know the ins and outs on what they do to chicken wings in the restaurants and what I do at home. But even if you ask for a traditional wing, which is usually not breaded, you ask for a traditional dry rub wing, it still could be breaded to make it crispy and make the seasoning stick on it. So you always, always, always need to call in or ask at the restaurant and say, is there a little bit of breading on your traditional dry rub wings? And I would say 8 out of 10 times they say yes to me. So it's not even the sauce that I'm worried about, not even like a boneless wing. It's the traditional ones that they usually do put breading on too. At home, I literally just put mine in the air fryer with some dry rub and it crisps it right up. Nobody needs gluten. Nobody needs a barbecue sauce, and they taste amazing. So if anybody wants tips on chicken wings, just DM me, because I live off of them.
Well, and you buy a good quality, chicken wing from a good quality humane source. And so you're dealing with a better source of fat. And so you're getting a lot of that, delicious flavor from good quality fat as well. So that's a whole other topic for another day, is in terms like fat and fat quality. Because I know, at least I grew up in a time, I know Casey, you're younger than me, but I grew up being taught that fat is bad. And for like over a decade, like fat is the devil. And no, there's so much more to that argument. And that's a whole other day. But I want to wrap up just some of the other things. So we've talked about some foods to look
We have
for.
one more, Jessica.
Pardon?
We got one more on our list.
Do we? I'll let you take it. You go ahead.
Yep. So anybody who's a cheese fan, saganaki. Saganaki is a Greek food. It does have breadcrumbs in it to, I think, crisp it up. I'm not really sure of the reasoning, but
flaming cheese, right?
Yeah, it's the flaming cheese. So make sure that you can, I don't know if you can modify it without the breading in there, but just watch out for saganaki if you are a saganaki fan like I was back in the day.
Yeah, I've had it before. It's been years, but it is delicious. I have no idea if it had breading in it though, because at the time I wasn't looking for that.
Yeah.
But yeah, who would think, right? Like what?
I know.
So all in all, just be aware of some of these foods that, you might think it's unlikely that they have gluten and other allergens in them, but ask. When you're not sure, ask. And also, I always say, and I say this to my clients all the time, because I know sometimes we can be shy about asking for what we need, and we might feel embarrassed depending on our personality. Speaking about myself, recovering people pleaser, never wanting to burden anybody or like get somebody to do something for me. But, we need to be assertive for what we need and to take care of our health. So there's nothing wrong when you're at a restaurant or calling a restaurant to ask about what is in the food if you have dietary needs. And most of us who have arthritis or an autoimmune condition do have dietary needs, whether we're aware of them or not. So it's perfectly fine to be kind and polite and to ask for what you need. Ask for restaurant and menu items to be modified for you if possible. And I never had a problem ordering in a restaurant by being kind and polite. So I don't think there's anything wrong with it. And like I said before, pick restaurants with higher quality foods, like pick something like, if you're going to go to a fast food restaurant, of course, you're not going to have a lot of good options there, if any, but pick restaurants with higher quality food. The ingredients tend to be a lot better. You might be paying more, but you're also getting what you pay for. And they're more likely to have a lot more options for people with food allergies and food sensitivities. And one of the other things I always tell my clients is bring a salad dressing. Like most salad dressings at restaurants, even if they're made there, which of course, if they're made from scratch, they tend to be a lot better quality, but even some good restaurants don't use good quality oils. And so you're using a lot of inflammatory vegetable oils in salad dressings. And lots of times there's a lot of sugars and things like that are not good for us. So I encourage my clients to bring their own salad dressing with them. I have no problem doing that. I think most of us ladies have fair-sized purses when we go out, or a tote bag. So nothing wrong with carrying a little container of salad dressing in your purse. And yeah, I would go from there. So just being aware of what you need and asking for it. And anything else you wanted to add before we wrap up today, Casey?
Yeah, on the gluten, last thing on the gluten comment, if you are gluten-free and you are trying to navigate restaurants going out, there is an app that you can download on your phone called Find Me Gluten-Free, which it's Find Me and then GF. Which just has a lot of input from your community saying which restaurants have gluten-free items, which restaurants are knowledgeable about gluten, which restaurants do not have anything gluten-free on there. So download that free app and put in a restaurant that you're looking for, or you can just search restaurants near you too. It's super convenient, and you can also add your own input on a restaurant that you want to help other people as well.
Amazing. I love that.
Yeah.
Well, thanks everyone for listening. We'll be back tomorrow instead of Thursdays. So tune in and we will see you then.
Bye, everybody.